What's up everyone? Financial Flow checking in. Expenses for almost everything are increasing quickly. Inflation rose to its highest level in more than 3 decades towards the end of 2021. And it is affecting specific sectors of the economy the hardest. In comparison to a year ago, drivers will see a 59% increase in gas prices. The average used automobile now sells for 26% more than it did previously. Rental homes are also leased at an alarmingly high rate. Maintaining stable prices is one of the Federal Reserve's primary responsibilities. Over the past few decades, the economy have been below the central bank's target rate. Analysts say there are signs of disturbance in the economy that the federal government is not giving any attention to. Central bank defendants say that there are numerous reasons to believe that inflation is only temporary. It doesn't necessarily imply that it will take 2 months. It could take a year. But it is not going to be 4% or 5% a year for the next 5 years. Governments are spending extensively to keep society afloat. The US Treasury's debt is managed by the feds. The bank's assets rose as it printed a large amount of money to support the country. This directs us to the question, what can the Federal Reserve do to control inflation? And what could they do to make the cost of living in the United States in check? Welcome to the Financial Flow. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up on our latest videos. The individuals who govern the US economy prefer to keep inflation around 2%, for the reason that a low and steady rate creates beneficial business environment. For example, food, energy, and housing are categories that are being tracked and weighed against one another to establish their significance. The product is then delivered and recorded over time. The Consumer Price Index tracks all of these spendings from over 90% of the US population. Then, the Trimmed Mean Inflation Trend discards outlier data and focuses on core prices. Changes in the trimmed mean indicate a stronger inflationary trend. Then there's the PCE, or Personal Consumption Expenditures. The Fed's preferred way to measure inflation is broader than the trimmed means. But it misses some data from the energy and food sectors because costs frequently take more major impact in these industries more often. What's included or excluded from each inflation index impacts its dependability. This could be a result of why a former Dallas Fed employee, Daniel DiMartino, believes that the PCE is flawed. Housing costs between 40 and 50% of an average American household's income, which makes the PCE's housing intake only approximately 22%. Then you get to the conclusion that the household's most significant expense is underaccounted for by a long shot, DiMartino says. Sometime in 2021, the PCE in numbers highly increased. When events like that happen, public officials shift to the Fed for solutions. Initially, the Federal Reserve was set up to create a stable American banking system. Its role has expanded over the years. In 1977, Congress gave it a dual mandate. Part of that mandate is to maximize employment and stabilize its prices. The Fed's ability to manage inflation depends on how the labor market drives inflation. Feds are seeing inflationary pressures, primarily because suppliers did not have adequate time to respond due to the demand increase. Delays are expected in the global supply chain and backed up ports in 2021. Many people, including Federal Reserve officials, do not feel the economy has stabilized. Chair Powell previously stated that this bout of inflation is temporary. Still, now he's backing away from that language, which, he inferred, would leave a permanent mark in the form of higher inflation. Powell, the newly elected chair of the Federal Reserve, claimed in 2019 that long-term inflation expectations were low. According to labor market experts, the interest rate hike that began in 2019 has slowed the recovery process. Then, the pandemic struck, forcing the central bank to adopt more accommodative financial conditions, which meant lowering interest rates, causing prices to rise faster. Economists believe that expectations are the primary driver of inflation. In 2021, a senior economist at the Board of Governors published a piece titled, "Why Do We Think That Inflation Expectations Mattered for Inflation?" The study claims that conventional economics gives a good cover record of criminally oppressive, unsustainable, and unjust social order. The paper reflects the views of a larger movement of people who think the Fed needs reform. The Federal Reserve had an internal debate about why we missed previous year's financial and subprime crisis. In previous years, there was an internal argument within the Fed over why they missed the financial crisis as well as the subprime crisis, and it was determined at the time that the Fed's inflation model was truly flawed. Because if it had properly included securities pricing, the Fed would not have been surprised ahead of the financial crisis. Therefore, what they did after drafting all these internal white papers and assessing if they needed a new inflation regime was nothing, and because they needed to hide behind this faulty model, which consistently understates inflation in order to maintain a more accommodative monetary policy than they would otherwise to keep the stock market afloat. Many Fed watchers point to model failures such as the Phillips curve. However, economists use those curves to make interest rate decisions. The model has two inputs: inflation rates and employment data. Various forces move where the economy sits along the curve at any given time. The plot of the Phillips curve shifts to the left when employment indicators indicate a tight labor market. This suggests more job openings than workers available to fill them. It also puts more pressure on businesses to raise salaries, resulting in greater inflation rates. The Feds can control inflation when it originates in the labor market. Their main tool for doing so is the federal funds rate, which, when lowered, helps boost economic development and job creation, while raising it slows the growth and job creation. The reason for doing so would be if there were concerns about inflation speeding up or perhaps spiraling out of control due to the low unemployment rate, which is putting upward pressure on prices as earnings rise. Official models, according to some economists, created a mistake in 2019. The unemployment rate has fallen to 3.5%. The Phillips curve tells us that prices should rise when unemployment is this low. The Feds began to raise interest rates before lowering them during the pandemic. Some argue that not raising interest rates was a mistake, that the country would have to pay for later. Jay Powell discovered in recent years that he was unable to boost interest rates. He was unable to raise interest rates to his own personal state's aim of 3%, which he never achieved. When you have a Federal Reserve, each cycle repeats itself. Every time they have a crisis, they try to fix the underlying issue of over-indebtedness by pouring more debt into the economy, whether the home sector before the financial crisis or the business sector when COVID hit. Others say the country is in a unique situation that necessitates immediate actions. Wilson says that the current situation in which we find ourselves is highly unusual. Outside influences have fundamentally transformed labor in recent decades. Employees had the upper hand when unions were a force to be reckoned with. Then there was a significant connection between inflation and pay inflation. A cycle of rising wages could occur. When the country began to disunion, employers began outsourcing to other countries. Then the country started to export deflation because its labor was much cheaper. These factors combined to give employers the upper hand over employees in America, and the Phillips curve's efficacy began to subside, and there was no immediate pay increase as a result of higher costs. Models like the Phillips curve have influenced policy decisions that have a meaningful impact on American workers. Lawrence Michel, a distinguished fellow at the Economic Policy Institute, says that salaries and benefits were suppressed for decades after 1979 due to problems that led wages to be suppressed, because of poor macroeconomic, monetary, and fiscal policies, as well as the pounding of unions in order to reduce union membership. Unemployment was high. Failure to increase the minimum wage keeps pace with inflation. Individuals are being forced to sign non-compete and arbitration agreements under a variety of new business practices. As a result, leaders are adjusting to prepare for the new normal. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said that longer-term inflation expectations, which have long been viewed as a critical driver of actual inflation and global disinflationary pressures, may have held inflation back more than expected. President Biden nominated Powell for a second term in the hopes of preserving the Fed's independence. This will be critical, as the group enters a new and odd decade. The Federal Reserve has kept interest rates at zero for more than a decade, and the outlook suggests that rates will remain low for the foreseeable future due to the failure of the US and other countries to meet their inflation targets in recent years. If the pandemic's temporary bottlenecks and supply chain disruptions fade, interest rates will need to remain low to keep the economy afloat. Some argue that the Fed would be better suited for pursuing a more significant long-term inflation objective, such as 3%. This can help counteract forecasts of weak future growth. The deflationary forces will continue to be a factor, particularly as income levels rise, now that you can fit an entire law library into a small chip of big data. You won't need a paralegal in the United States. You can hire one from another country. So, right now, higher paying positions are at risk of being shipped overseas. And no one is talking about how this could lead to inflation in terms of the amount of schooling required in America, because you'll need that next skill level up. You'll need that graduate degree to have certainty of income security in the future, because many occupations that require a bachelor's degree will be eliminated. The disinflationary urge will be present according to DiMartino. However, in the short term, the Fed and the entire country are calm as a result of these price surges. Economist Mark Zandi says that there is no evident direct assistance. Thus, he believes the ultimate responsibility is on Congressman administration lawmakers who have the means and the power to help. As per Wilson, the American Rescue Plan did not cause the crisis, and the Fed's monetary policy did not cause the inflation problem. Still, the Fed's authority to change interest rates would have an impact, slowing the recovery. Thanks for watching! Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have a good one.